Welcome, guys, to the Progress Awards. This is something that I'm starting this year, and I'm going through a bunch of categories from the year, what's gone well, what hasn't gone well, etc. And we're going to go into it now. So, what we're going to cover in this video, I'm probably going to split this up into two videos because there's quite a lot here. So, I'm going to look at the first four categories, the best and worst industries for angel or startup investing, the best and worst investments of angel investing I've done in the last, or certainly what's happened in the last year, stocks that show promise for 2024, and 10-year investments I like. In the second part, which is not this video, I'm going to talk about industries, the macroeconomy, maybe companies that are making a really interesting, big impact on the world, some stuff from the best tech growth firms that I've invested in, and biggest cash flowing assets in general, outside, not necessarily angel investing, equities, etc., just in general look. So we'll do the first four today. Right, so now, first things first, like this is just from my experience. I've invested in 100 different angel investments, a variety of different ticket prices, if you like, or investment amounts. And I haven't invested in every industry. One second. I haven't invested in every industry, but I have invested in a number. So I'm going to look at these different categories for why I consider each industry to be good or bad. So AI, volume of funds, very, very high, growth potential high, popularity high, risk is pretty low, high profit margins if you do it well, net profitability is high. That means if you execute well, then you should take market share, but obviously it's very competitive. Also, AI can be applied to pretty much all of these things. So, it's a caveat that it's almost like a horizontal rather than a vertical industry. Nevertheless, moving on, fintech, the volume of funds is enormous for fintech. Whenever a fintech goes to market, if it has, a decent growth rate, decent number of users, it can raise capital quite easily. The growth potential is high. Everyone needs finance. Everyone needs apps to help them budget, to help them invest, to help them save, etc. So the popularity is super hot at the moment. The risk is pretty low, especially if companies don't avoid kind of current accounts and credit cards, which are very low margin. It can be and should be high profitability. So it's a good one to go into. This is not advice, by the way, it's just my opinion. Just my opinion. I'm not a financial advisor. Ecotech, I think the volume of funds is on the lower side. The growth potential is high if they get it right. The popularity is kind of waning. It's not as high as it was a few years ago. The risk is pretty high. Net profitability depends on what it is, obviously, but it's not as high, in my opinion, as technology. And moving on to software as a service, funds is very high, growth potential is high, popularity, it really depends. Again, it's a bit like a horizontal because there's lots of different software firms. If it's within fintech, it's high. If it's within AI, particularly, then it's high. But if it's just B2B SaaS, it's not always that popular. The risk can be high because you need to capture market share, but the profitability is high. Now, this last category I'm calling unique or various industries where you have like a specific like product or service, which is just so unique that like nobody can copy it. But if you gain market share, then you can own that market space. There's one company that I talk about in this deck that's done this very well in the last year to it's really surprising amount, and I think it's very interesting. The popularity is kind of low because like nobody knows about these and they kind of sit under the radar. But when you find them, if they're highly profitable and they can own the kind of market, they can do exceptionally well. They normally have lower valuations as well. So like an uptick of like 10, 20x, 30x, within a couple of years is not unlikely. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So best investments, where's my money box gone? There we go. I don't know why the screenshot isn't on the first one. But anyway, TerraFirm is one of these. Basically, from plastic pollution, they've created a new kind of resource, a new material. And this material they're applying to it's like a new kind of like biodegradable, recyclable, biodegradable like material that people can use in like anything. And they're creating products like plastic bins and like cups and like anything that's plastic essentially. And they've already like onboarded like a bunch of retailers and like it's just a small team, but they're a really talented team. They were only valued at 4.5 million. And we'll talk about in a minute how much they're valued at. But How About is a social media software as a service company, which I spotted and thought was really interesting. I think it originally went to market of maybe, I don't know, 4 or 6 million. And then in their most recent round in 2022, they were valued at 8 million. And they've been growing like wildfire. Seriously, they've been growing like amazing. Moneybox too is valued a bit higher, but the user growth is enormous. And the assets under management, because it's in the fintech space in the UK, has exploded. So if we're looking at this, Terafine, I think Torafine, sorry, I've spelled that wrong. But they've like went to market again with a rumored valuation of 85 million, and that was after 1 year. So that's like basically a 20x in 1 year. And there were people commenting on the next fund raise, which I can't seem to find at the moment. It's maybe because I didn't invest in it at the time for various different reasons. But like there were people from the US saying like US companies are valued at like 2 billion. So why aren't you valued at 2 billion? And they value themselves at like 90 million or something. And they were just saying in the comments, like, we're a British company, we're not going after and like crazy valuations. But to me, that said that this Torafine company could be valued at 1 billion at some point in the future. And if it can maintain that growth from kind of 80, 90 million up to 1 billion, that would be an enormous gain, you know, an absolutely more like 200xer, which, you know, I'm kind of monitoring. I don't have a big investment in that company, actually. Because I didn't, you know, it's one of those kind of, if we go back to that previous category, it's like this unique kind of unique category. They're creating their own material. It's like, you know, it could kind of hit or miss, but when it hits, you know, it can hit really, really big. How about it's a social media app to like plan like events and stuff, and it syncs with all your calendars. It has a kind of chat feature, a bit like WhatsApp. It's grown from 300,000 users. I looked in July 2023, and they said they had 1 million. And then if you look at them again online, just to Google search them on like Apple, they're saying they have 2 million users. So they've gone from 300,000 to 2 million. And that network effect, because it's a kind of social app where you invite your friends, there's nothing stopping them to get, you know, 4 million users, 5 million, 10 million, 15 million. It's really should grow through the roof. And I've invested in this company twice, and a substantial, you know, a decent amount, actually, like a couple of percent of my total fund is actually in this company. I really back it, and I think it's super exciting. The moment they're targeting slightly younger people, if they ever wanted to expand it, they could just kind of update the UI to get in slightly older people, maybe in their 30s and 40s. But I think they're focusing on people in their teens and 20s at the moment. But it's super exciting. Moneybox is a bigger company, but nevertheless, it's gone from like 200,000 users up to 400, then up to 800. And now I believe they're over 1 million. I got a friend of mine who I got him a job there, basically. Well, I didn't get him a job. I kind of advised he would work there. I interviewed there actually for a marketing role a couple of years ago. Nevertheless, I see they're only really targeting the UK at the moment, but I honestly think if they targeted, you know, America or other countries, they could really explode their user base. I think they've got multiple billions under assets under administration. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 5 billion. You know, I keep saving into it, you know, every week. I keep investing in it, and I think their users do as well. So I think that's really, really good. Just as an indication, I have invested heavily in these companies. I have over 20% of my entire fund, it's about 100 companies I've invested in, are in these 3 companies. Like I said, this Terafine is only small, but these 2, it's significant. It's about 20 to 25% in these. And then the other large percentage of the fund is in kind of fintech companies like Chip, Plum, Wirex, which is a kind of crypto fintech, and Lumio, which is a kind of aggregator. Chip and Plum are competitors to Moneybox. I have actually quite a bit more money in Moneybox than Chip and Plum, but nevertheless, in terms of my overall angel investing, I'm pretty happy with it this year. I've seen like really good growth. In fact, Wirex has over 6 million users at the moment, so that's grown considerably. And again, I've got about 1 or 2% of my fund in Wirex, which I'm happy with. Moneybox is about 4 or 5%. I believe, maybe 3 or 4% of the entire fund is in Moneybox. Anyway, I'm quite happy overall. There have been some losses, though. I think there's more than 5 of my companies have gone bankrupt. Some of them really surprising, and we're going to talk about that next. 3 companies that have gone bust, though. Fortunately, it's less than like 1-2% of the fund, so I'm not that worried about it. Stem and Glory had 2 profitable vegan cafes, vegan or vegetarian, plant-based restaurants. I didn't put that much money in it. I thought that they weren't managing it, and they were high cost compared to. I did a comparison between them and Tortilla, and their like profit per store was a lot lower. So I don't know why they went bust. You know, they raised 520,000. They were profitable, but they went bust. Climate is a financial investment platform that focused on kind of positive climate change companies. And they raised a lot of money. They raised nearly 3 million on Crowdcube. They may have raised more because I think they did more than 1 round. So I don't know the full amount they raised. I'm pretty sure it was over 3 million. It could have been even over 5 million. And they went bust, unfortunately. So it does actually show you that if you're not invested in the right fintech or the right company, then, you know, just because the industry is doing well doesn't necessarily mean the individual company is going to do well. Moving on, Meatless Farm was one of the largest vegan or plant-based food companies in the entire world. They were valued at over 200 million, and they raised 3.3 million in this round. They raised, I think, a lot more than that. I think it may have been 10 or 20 million. They raised like so much money. But what happened to them is, what happened to them was basically one of their lead investors like pulled out, and they weren't optimizing the company for profitability, and they just couldn't like cover the costs, which is just like a real shame. In the end, it was bought out of receivership for like, 1% of the overall valuation. It was ridiculous. I don't know the specifics, but the point was it was bought by some vulture fund or whatever, and they got it for pennies on the pound, which is a real shame. I actually came across Meats Farm because I'm a consumer of their products. I really like them. I haven't eaten so much of them recently, maybe because I'm so pissed that they went bust. I did have about 1% of my fund in Meatless Farm. Really thought it was going to do really, really well. Anyway, so moving on to shares, I wanted to look at the top 10 performers of November, just of this recent month that's gone. I'm filming this in December. But there's some really interesting growth companies there, or companies that are considered to be growth companies, one of which I have actually started working for. So I work for Trustpilot now, which I'm really, really enjoying. Anyway, some of these have gone up quite a decent amount. But I dug into a couple of them just to see if like any of them had done like well throughout the year. And I looked at Rolls-Royce, which is nearly like more than doubles, like tripled or something, in like up nearly 200%, from like 100p to nearly 300p in 1 year, which is just amazing considering it was, it would have been valued at less than like probably something like 7 billion or something. Can't do the numbers, but now it's gone up to 24 bill. So they're doing something right. Maybe one day I'll do a video on analyzing like how come they've done so well. I mean, to be fair, if they've like trebled, it would have meant that their PE was like 5 or 6, and now it's 16. So I think that's kind of interesting. What about the others? Well, Ocado was up, but it's only up 11% to date. So it's been a rocky ride for Ocado. It's a London-based kind of packaging and delivery company that I think they do the storage and warehousing for Waitrose in the UK. Trustpilot, the company I work for, is actually up 36% to date. However, if you'd invested if you'd invested in September, let's say, it would have nearly doubled your money. And indeed, if you invested in the low of July 2023, you would have more than doubled your money. Although the PE ratio, shouldn't really be talking about it, but I think that the tech valuations in the US are pretty high, and this is actually on the London market. They've just reached the FTSE 250. Maybe I'll dive into them if I'm allowed to. I'm not sure if I'm going to be allowed to talk about Trustpilot. Anyway. Stocks that show promise for 2024. Well, Begbies, I did a video on Begbies. They're one of the leading insolvency kind of consultancy businesses. They help businesses to turn around, or they help them to go insolvent because it's a stressful process and a bit of a nightmare. So I think that could be good for the next couple of years. Insolvencies are at the highest they've been in many, many years since the financial crisis of 2008 to 2010. And I did a video on this earlier this year. They've done well this year. However, they've invested a lot of their money in acquisitions, so it hasn't really shown on the earnings. But I expect Begbies to zoom in the next couple of years. Obviously, I'm a fan of K-Box. I've been talking about K-Box for a while now, and actually, from this year, calendar year, they're up around 50% their share price, plus dividends of 6 or 7%, something like that. So nearly edging on 60% gain for the year. Now, depending on when you bought shares, I didn't buy shares at the low. I actually bought earlier, so my kind of average weighted price for K-Box is probably closer to 200p. So I'm not laughing, but I did do videos on K-Box. I've done a bunch of videos. I expect them to continue to do well. While other companies aren't doing well, people are going to start to notice how well K-Box is doing. They're starting advertising. They're starting awesome things. I think they're going to do well. What about the investments for 10 years? I think K-Box is going to continue to do well if they can press the accelerator on growth. They're talking about launching a new brand. Hopefully, it's a vegan brand. Maybe I think they should be thinking about international expansion. They're talking about 400 store count in the UK. I think it really should be 4,000 stores globally or 40,000. Why can't they be bigger than Dunkin' Donuts? I think they can. Tortilla, speaking of growth, they have less than 100 stores in the UK. I love their foods. A lot of people love their food. They're incredibly popular. I hope they continue to grow. I have some concerns over their growth plans, but I do think over the long term, the shares have been terrible the last year or two. But I think over a period of time, a 10-year period, they could do quite well. Battle Boom Bars, or otherwise known as the parent company, XP Factory, they do these awesome bars. They're growing a lot. They're showing they're reinvesting. They have some high admin costs. They're expanding the share count. So there are some slight concerns, but overall the company is exploding in growth. So I expect them to do well in the coming years, and I think they'll be a good 10-year investment. These are kind of risky stocks, and I'm not a financial advisor, so obviously don't take this as financial advice. It's just my opinions. But I'd say I really like these three companies. I like to focus on smaller companies. You're probably not going to be getting me saying that Meta or Google will be the best investments for the next 10 years, even though they might be. But I just, at the moment, I'm not focused on big companies. Maybe in the future I will be. Okay, so that's what I've got so far, folks. I've basically covered like these 4 categories here. So I'm going to just put those in dark. And in the next video, I'm going to be looking at some other things: industries, macroeconomy, some companies that are having an interesting, cool impact on the world, tech companies I've invested in, and other cash flowing assets, which I kind of have an interest in. You know, speaking personally, I'll stop sharing my screen now. Like, I lost my job at WhatsApp, where I was working for Meta in the mass layoffs, and I did notice that my cash flow kind of went down, obviously, from that. And like, now I'm really, my next priority goal for me and my family is to try to increase the cash flow that is not reliant on a specific company. So just increase the pots of money and cash flow, and that's why I think I want to cover that in terms of cash flowing assets and where I think I am going to be investing in 2024 and in the future. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, like and subscribe, and the knowledge is power, especially the right kind of knowledge, and progress is everything. If you've got any comments, queries, questions, let me know in the comment section below. Tell anyone that's interested in, you know, improving their lot in life or improving their family's growth about this channel. I do talk about a range of different things. I'll see you guys in the next upcoming video. Take care.